is very important. We have the Iran Human Rights and ECPM, and Iran Human Rights have informators who provide all this information, sometimes risking their life, to have all this information and to try to gather all the real figures of the death penalty in Iran. And then, before letting the floor to Mahmoud, one of the main objectives also of this report is to have an international pressure. Don't forget human rights. This is our message. Don't forget the abolition of the death penalty and human rights in general when you discuss with human rights authorities. And we are here in Brussels at the beginning of the World Congress Against Death Penalty. This World Congress is supported by European institutions, including the European Commission, including the European Parliament. And our message is to not avoid the human rights in any discussions with any Iranian governmental representative. This is for the base of any discussion. And I think that this is a role of the media as well, to always link. In the past, when we were talking about Iran, it was only about nuclear issues, only that. And now it's only about Trump and Iran and so on. We ask every time, and please, for the media, please towards the European institutions, include human rights in your discussion, include the abolition of death penalty in this discussion. Maybe now, for the figures, I think the best thing is to let the floor to.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, I support anything that Rafael said. If we want human rights to be on top of the agenda between EU and Iran in any dialogue. So, as Rafael mentioned, we use different sources for. To make this report. Some of the sources I have written there, they are official media, websites of judiciary, so they are officially announced, but most of the executions are not officially announced. They are a secret. And we provide these numbers by information through the families, lawyers, sources within the prisons, and other human rights groups, and all officially unannounced executions have been confirmed by 2 independent sources. So you can imagine it is very difficult to confirm through 2 independent sources under those conditions. So the numbers we provide are lower than the actual number, but we believe that it's the most realistic report to be presented at this time. So if you look at the execution trends throughout the year, the yellow is the numbers that have not been announced officially. Most of the executions are not announced. And this year we had 273 executions, which we could confirm through 2 independent sources, and 66% of them were not announced officially. You probably have heard news about Mr. Zarif's resignation, Iranian foreign minister, and some people have been talking about that there are hardliners within the system, and they are, the president and foreign minister. And I can, based on our numbers, if we compare the 2 presidents, Ahmadinejad and Rouhani, Ahmadinejad's 8 years and Rouhani's 5.5 years. The number of executions are higher during the 5.5 years of Rouhani. And the number of executions, monthly average number of executions are almost twice as high, has been during President Rouhani's presidency. And neither Foreign Minister Zarif nor President Rouhani have ever protested or expressed any concern about these numbers. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. We can look at the number of compared execution numbers in the last 14 years. There is one good thing. For the first time, we can announce something positive in this report, and that is that since Iran Human Rights started preparing the report in 2008, today's numbers are the lowest. The lowest numbers in 10 years. But still, it's among the highest in the world. So Iran is still, after China, the top executioner of the world, but we see a very significant reduction, which we welcome. We find it, and we hope that it's the first step. And if you look at the worst years around, let's say, like in 2015, 2014, 2013, these are the years where the nuclear negotiations were going on. There were very good communication between Europe and Iran. So a good dialogue and good relations by itself doesn't lead to improvement of the human rights. Human rights must be on the agenda. In 2015, in average, 3 people were executed each day. But back to this year, 273. Why do we have such a remarkable reduction? And the answer is very clear, because it is mainly due to the reduced number of drug-related executions. Since 2016, there have been a process in the Iranian parliament. The EU has put it on top of their agenda, and there have been tremendous international pressure. And as you can see, the numbers this year are 24 in 2018 compared to 231 the year before, and so on. So it's the lowest number recorded, and that's the good thing is that it's because of enforcement of a new law. So the purpose of this law was to restrict use of the death penalty for drug-related executions, and it has managed. And I think it tells us a lot about how important international focus and pressure is, that even in a country like Iran, you can achieve important results within the human rights, but the focus must be there. We have a little concern if you look at when these 24 were executed. We see that most these people were executed in the last 3 months of the year. So we hope that it's not a start of a new wave. So we are still optimistic, but we just noticed that in December, half of the executions for drugs last year happened in December. I will go very short through what those 273 who were executed have done. Majority of them, about 70%, they are accused of murder. And then the second group is something called Muharebe and corruption on earth. I will come back to it. But then you have drug executions and rape. So when it comes to Muharebe and corruption on earth, these are 2 terms from Sharia. Muharebe means being at war with God. And corruption on earth is legally a very vague expression. It's up to the judge to decide whether what you have done is beyond a certain extent, which makes it corruption on earth. For example, economic corruption, it doesn't become corruption on earth automatically. It's up to the judge to decide. Or many other things. For example, one of the people who were executed for corruption on earth, he was accused of being leader of a fake spiritual group. when it comes to Moharbe, we had 8 people executed charged with cooperation with ISIS, 3 executed for membership or relation with banned Kurdish groups, and 3 with banned Baluchi groups. So ethnic regions are important here. But another issue with this group is they are all tried by the revolutionary courts, and the due process, which in general is violated daily in Iran, is even worse in the revolutionary courts. I give you one example. These 2, they are cousins. Their name is Zanyar and Lokman Moradi. They were arrested more than 10 years ago for, they were charged with the membership in the Kurdish group and assassination of a son of the Friday prayer of that city. They were tortured to give confession. Iran Human Rights have talked to them, and they have described the torture. They were threatened to rape and physically abused, and later they were sentenced based on these confessions to death. They were executed and buried. The family don't know where their bodies are. One of them, Lokman, who is here, he could prove that he was not even present in that city at the time of the murder of assassination of the son of Friday Prayer. And the lawyer mentioned that, but the revolutionary court wouldn't want to hear. Execution for economic corruption. 3 people were executed for economic corruption. This is, there haven't been so many people executed for economic corruption. Corruption is a huge issue in Iran. We look at it in the context of the protests in the beginning of the year. There were widespread protests throughout the country, mainly because of the deteriorated economic situation of Iranians and poverty, and because of the corruption within the system. In summer, Iranian leaders, they promised to upscale the fight against the corruption. And what they did was to arrest some people, sentence some of them to death, and execute them. We have said that death penalty is not the response to Iran's corruption issues. And I think most people know that, even people inside Iran, that these executions are not directed to reduce corruption, but they are directed to reduce the protests. Because death penalty is the most important instrument to spread fear in the society, and Iranian authorities know how to use it. Issue of lack of due process is also evident in other issues. This is another person whose execution received attention. He was a member of a Gonabadi Dervish Sufis in Iran. Maybe you have heard that there were protests among Dervish Sufis, Gonabadi Dervish in Tehran. During this protest, they arrested a person called Mohammad Salas. They accused him of driving a bus over 3 policemen. So he was sentenced to death for murder. They got the confession from him while he was injured at the hospital. And when his defense lawyer protested about a lack of due process, she was arrested too. So he was executed. I talked about the reduction in number of drug-related executions. That's unfortunately the only positive things we can say about this year's report. Iran still is the biggest executioner of juvenile offenders in the world. And I think in the last few years, Iran is the only country executing juvenile offenders. In 2018, 6 juveniles were executed, and 2 of them were child brides, young girls who were accused of, who were married at a very low age, and they were accused of murdering their husbands. I will not come into the detail, but you can read more about Mahbouba Mofidi, who actually didn't commit the murder the way she told her lawyer later. Right now, there is a juvenile at imminent danger of executions, Mohammad Kalhour. UN Special Rapporteurs, a few days ago, they published an urgent action. He's accused of murdering his teacher when he was 15. According to the state medical experts, he was not mentally fit and he had also deep depression. So they meant that he couldn't be given the responsibility. But the authorities didn't listen to it, and he can be executed any day from now. Another issue, so one of the issues that Iran Human Rights and ECPM have called on, especially on the EU, is to put the issue of juvenile offenders on top of the issue. We cannot tolerate that in 2019 countries still put death penalty on children. And Iran is the only one right now, and I think sustained pressure can give results here. Another issue where Iran is unique is public executions. 13 public executions last year. It is actually lower than the last years, but there is no indication that this number is due to a political decision, because in 2019, so far, 6 people have been publicly executed. One of them just a few days ago. Very often we see children watching public executions. Here in this, Iran has had problems with the lack of water and rain. This banner says that implementation of hudud punishment, which is execution, is more important than rainwater for us. Probably for the authorities it is, because it's their main instrument to spread fear. In some occasions, we see that the executions take place in residential areas where people can watch the executions from the windows of their apartments. In this particular execution in Shiraz, the Iranian official news agency, IRNA, said that there were many children between 4 and 13 watching the executions. So I think we will, when the report arrives, sorry, you can read the report. The report will be published on our websites, IHR.net and ECPM.org. You can see there are many more details. We have talked about how Iranian people regard death penalty, and in the issue of death penalty for murder, the families of the murder victim, they can choose whether to forgive or choose execution. I'm glad to say that there are many more people who choose forgiveness. So Iranian society, we take it as a signal that they don't want death penalty the way the authorities want. So I hope we can discuss the strategies to restrict the use of the death penalty. As Rafael mentioned, sustained international pressure is extremely important. It should be on top of the agenda. And then empowerment and mobilization of the civil society. Despite being one of the countries with the highest number of executions, I think among the retentionist countries, at least in the Middle East and Asia, Iran is one of the countries with the highest number of abolitionist movements. So I think this should be regarded as an important resource, and EU, which has open dialogue with Iran, can play extremely important role, both on putting that penalty on the agenda and to support human rights defenders and the abolitionist movement. So I think we stop here.
Thank you very much. So despite positive decrease of execution that we, Iran Human Rights and ECPM welcome from the Iranian authorities, all these issues, transparency, ethnic group, juveniles, women, public executions, political use of the death penalty, freedom of religions, everything who has been presented remained relevant in the situation. You, as I told you, during the last few days we will be the World Congress Against Death Penalty. We will have the presence of many Iranian figures And so if you are looking for testimonies, interviews about Iran or about any other countries or approach about the death penalty, you are welcome to the World Congress. It will be at the Parliament tomorrow and after at the Palais d'Egmont on Thursday and Friday. The special rapporteur, UN special rapporteur in Iran will be there. If you want as well, Dr. Jalali, who is on death row in Iran. So his wife will be present as well. So, is there any question now on the current?
Yeah, and our panel on Iran will be on Thursday morning with Dr. Javid Rahman. So we will discuss specifically Iran issues.
You try to link
you mentioned Iran from the Egyptian colleague.
Yes. My name is Tarek Mahmoud. I work for the Middle East News Agency.
Yeah.
You try to link the resignation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs with, in a way, with the death penalty.
No,
or
completely the opposite. I don't think this resignation has anything to do with the human rights or the death penalty, because Mr. Zarif has never expressed any concern about human rights violations in Iran.
The figure shown between the numbers of executions during the Ahmadinejad area and Rouhani area are, I think, very interesting, because we don't say that Rouhani and Zarif didn't have pressure, but we say that during that time, Rouhani and Zarif, the number of executions were higher than the previous years. So they didn't do anything. Yes.
Yeah. Mirza Hassan, a reporter from Polish TV. Do you have any information to give us which nationality they are getting more in death penalty in Iran?
You mean ethnicities, ethnic groups in Iran? Yeah. Well, it is very difficult because for many of these executions, the information is not sufficient. What we know is it is in the report. We have the geographic distribution of the executions. When it comes to the ethnic groups like Kurds and Baluchis, we notice clearly that majority of the executions, like 97% of the executions, are not announced officially. So according to official sources, there are 3 people executed, but then the actual number is 100.
But your opinion,
Yeah.
which nationality?
Well, I can say that there is a relation between death penalty and the marginalized areas of Iran. So if we look at the executions per capita in different regions, the poorest regions like South Khorasan, and then we have Baluchistan, West Azerbaijan. And West Azerbaijan, I know that most of the people executed there are Kurds. And of course Baluchistan are Baluchis, but Kurdish prisoners and Baluchi prisoners, they are also executed in other prisons, like Zanyar and Lokman Moradi, which I showed pictures of. They were executed in Tehran, close to Tehran. When it comes to political executions for membership in groups like Moharebe, which I mentioned here, during the last 10 years, more than 90% of them belong to Kurdish, Baluchi, and Arab ethnicities, right? So it means that there is a overrepresentation of the executions when it comes to the ethnic regions, especially executions due to political affiliation. And I think it could be because first of all, the focus is not strong enough on the ethnic regions of Iran. And the other is that authorities use the fight against terrorism as a pretext to do these executions. So it is much easier to arrest a Kurdish or Baluchi civil society activist and condemn him for cooperation with terrorist groups. We have actually seen examples of that.
It's very important what Mahmoud said, is that Kurds and Baluch are much more vulnerable when we talk about fight against terrorism, and the death penalty always applied to the most vulnerable. And these populations, this kind of population, are often more vulnerable in terms of political issues, charged for political issues, as well economically. They are coming from the most vulnerable place.
We have a section about the ethnic executions in the ethnic among ethnic groups in the report, which will write. Thank you.
When you're talking about put pressure on Iran about human rights, what do you mean? I mean, Europe, how Europe can put pressure, negotiate, meanwhile put pressure. How it works?
Part of it, I say, because of our previous experiences. In the last 40 years, I think we have had 2 times when Iranian authorities have actually made the move deliberately to reduce the scope of the death penalty. One of them was about stoning. And when it comes to stoning, after Iran and EU upgraded their relations, after President Khatami was elected in 1997 or 6, one of the demands for upgrading the relation was removing stoning or stopping stoning implementation. And Iran actually signed a moratorium in December 2002. Which they didn't follow, but they stopped announcing stoning executions. But then in 2010, after, you remember, Sakina Ashtiani campaign all over the world, after that they stopped stoning implementations. And they still say that they don't do it because the political costs are very high. The same with the drug-related executions. A few weeks ago, the head of the Iranian parliament, he said it very clearly. Death penalty must be the last instrument you use to fight drug trafficking, because the costs of these executions are very high. So by pressure, meaning that Iran is interested to upgrade their relations. Economic relations, political relations, they don't want to be isolated. And I think on the other hand, European Union can actually put some conditions to that. And if the political cost of violation on human rights and death penalty are high enough, Iranian authorities will follow. Iranian regime is not like Taliban. They are very pragmatic.
So it's a little bit contradictory with what you showed us between 2015 and 2017, that you have a high numbers of executions, and in terms that they just signed the nuclear agreement and everything, so they were really good relation with Europe, and
but no discussion about the human rights.
No, that's the thing.
That's the thing.
Like, because
because you see here the numbers that you refer to. In 2003, Rouhani became president, and nuclear negotiations started seriously. The executions kept going up because issue of human rights and death penalty were not on the table. I have talked to European politicians, and they used to say that we should, once we reach an agreement and sanctions are removed, human rights situation will be better.
Yeah, step after step. Their discourse was, first we talk about economics grade, and then human rights will come after. And our position is no, you have to link right now in your discussions any economic opportunity with human rights.
I mean, it should be on the agenda. And actually, the reason, if you look at the EU's Iran report, in 2016, they clearly say, in the April 2016, that they start the second round of their dialogue, where death penalty will be an important part, and where death penalty for drug offenses will be important. And you see, just in 2-3 years, it has given a goal. So I think that putting it on agenda is very important.
My name is Reza Jabali. I'm from Abo Association, Iranian. I'm Iranian also. Before I start, I have to say that if I say something, doesn't mean that I'm supporting Iranian government. I was a member of MEK. I was in prison from 1981 to 1986, including 2 years of solitary confinement in Gohardek Karaj and Kafan suburb. So, and I was in Iraq for more than 10 years with MEK. Our friend says twice nationality, different nationality. And you didn't say anything. We don't have different nationality in Iran. We are all Iranian. We have Kurds, Spanish, Kurds, but we are Iranian. The only people who use this term, they are the supporter of Saudi's government, that they pay them money to want to separate some part of Iran. When you say things about Baluchi and Kurds, I believe as someone that was active since 1980 or 79, when I was just a teenager, I think you have to be honest and your report has to be truthful in order for Iranian people to believe that. If you are talking about Saudis or other government, that's fine. You can come and say whatever you want to say.
Just to cut you, we didn't use the term of nationality. It's not our term. We use and Mahmoud saying ethnicity. So I don't. It's your problem with him. It's not ours. So
he said that
it is your problem with him. It is not our problem.
But that's fine. So what is the question,
as an Iranian,
yeah.
He should know that Iranian people are very sensitive.
We know that. That's why we answer about ethnicity and about vulnerability groups inside Iran. Vulnerable groups.
But what I'm saying, when you're talking about the Baluch and Arab, you have to separate those Baluch that they killed the soldier, they beheaded the soldier, like Rigi that was executed, and you can see what they done in YouTube, that they beheaded people. You have to separate these people from the activists. Or if you get your information, when you say two independent sources, if they are MEK, I will tell you to stay away from them. Don't use their sources because they are completely fake. Yeah. I was one of them for past 40 years. And then Iranian people, they hate them, you know that.
Yeah.
So your report has to be truthful when you talk about execution, when you talk about Baluch and Kurd, you have to be truthful. If you want these
gentlemen,
your activity
can we answer?
Yeah, can I answer? Thank you.
Yes.
So first of all, we have many more sources than any opposition groups inside
like
Iran.
what sources?
As I tell you, huh?
Can you name a few of them?
They will be arrested. You want to? I mean, in Iran, being an abolitionist, just saying I'm against death penalty, you get 17 years in prison. You have
I was in prison myself.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
If you want, you
excuse
sources,
me.
you have which sources?
You have talked about. I tell
what?
you.
He was answering.
I don't care. I have to ask my question.
Yeah.
It's not a question. You are giving a meeting. It's not a question.
I'm asking what are the sources?
Okay, gentlemen.
Please,
can I answer?
Can we answer?
Can I answer?
So you can.
No, can I answer? I'm telling you.
Can we
Listen, the question?
Listen. Can I answer the question?
Answer the
Okay.
question.
When we present numbers for death penalty,
Yes.
we don't care what they have done.
No.
We are presenting a
Guilty
number
people
about
are not guilty.
Okay.
That's one thing. So people who have committed murder, Many of them have actually committed murder, right? So that's the number. The other thing is that there is a lack of due process. Regardless of what the person has done, he or she deserves a defense lawyer, a due process, a right to defending himself. In Iran, in the revolutionary courts,
That's completely correct.
yeah. The defendants, lawyers, they don't have access to the cases, to the papers. So that's the issue. You know, we don't go into the, you know, what you say about the groups which are in Iran, the Saudi link, and we really don't go there because I think that, okay, you have ethnic groups in Iran. Some of them, they call themselves nationalists, some, nationals, some they call themselves part of Iran. That's not our issue. Our issue is death penalty, and we are documenting it, and that's what we hope to achieve. That death penalty should be removed.
And what Mahmoud said, that we focus on innocent, guilty. It's not our issue. So of course we will provide information about guilty people, and most 80%, 80% of our figures are about guilty people. It's important to say, because you mentioned these people are guilty. It's not our issue.
And we don't say
Very
that they are,
important.
and we don't say
Very
that they are
important.
all activists.
Yeah.
Okay, as far as what you said right now, I think it's completely correct, and you are right. And what you said about the process, I was witness of it. I had 2 minutes of it. Do you accept your charges? I said no. That's it.
Exactly. I mean,
You are right about that.
Yeah.
You know.
that's good. Thank you.
Is there another question?
There are no other questions?
So please follow our website.
Yeah, but we are at your